Need running shoes. As long as I can run, I'll be fine, right? Or so I thought back in sixth grade in my first year of track. I learned it the very hard way after I ran my first track meet in basketball shoes. And yeah, that's when I started to understand that not only training is important, but also running shoes can be also a factor too. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about mainly about what do track runners looking for in a shoe. Although I'm talking about shoes revolving around track runners, this is the beauty of track and field is that is mainly running, and the most common exercise that people do outside is running. So so all the shoes I'm going to mention can also be applied to any person that just jogs out, like loves to jog or run miles outside for fun. So before I get to the main topics, I want to mention some terminology so that way it doesn't cause any confusion for you guys. So the bottom of the shoe right here, what I'm gonna is called the outsole. This is where all the traction is gonna be, and then the middle cushion right here of the shoe is called a midsole. Midsole. That's where all the cushion is gonna be for your feet. And then this front part right here is gonna be the toe box. Back part right here of the shoe where this cushion is, that's gonna be called the heel cage. So the topics I'm mainly going to talk about is mostly for short distance runners, what kind of shoes they're looking for, and then long distance runners, what kind of shoes they're looking for too. And I'm going to finally wrap it up talking about some of the story, what I learned through my experience from track, and some of the things that like carried on to me in my daily life now. So, but first, let's talk about short distance because that was mostly the group I was in back in track, and also where I see a lot of people were back. A lot of my classmates were in that group too. So short distance. The key word for short distance is burst. Mostly these races are about from 100 meters to 400 meters. So they end pretty quickly. So the key thing about short distance runners is it's all about how fast you can get to that finish line as soon as possible and using all your energies from the start. So what kind of shoes they're looking for is mainly lightweight shoes. So that way they use all their energy more on pushing themselves forward rather than lifting up their legs often. And also since the shoes is lightweight, they tend to be more ventilation since the material is more thinner too. Also, the toe box is going to be another really key factor because, like I say, this is where most of the power is going to come from. So for a short distance runner shoes, it should be more the front should be more flexible, so that way they can bend their toes more from the ground, so that way they can push themselves off the ground to get to develop that momentum. And also, in a track race, most of the starting position is starting from the toe too. So you want to have a really strong start for a short distance runner. And then another thing they're looking for is spikes. These are usually track runners will usually use their spikes during either a bad weather or mostly pretty often if they want to be like very serious and competitive. Track spikes help like tractions on the ground, so that way they don't lose balance, and also so that way they can focus more on the race rather than trying to use all that energy to keep themselves balanced from the wet ground. Next thing, and then now that I've talked about the short distance runners, the second thing I want to talk about is long distance. So long distance runners, the key word is endurance and strides. So it's all about how long you can last, how long you can hold it to the very end. So the number one thing they're looking for a shoe is mostly the heel to toe ratio. The heel has to be a little bit taller, as you can see. The heel right here is taller than the front right here, because the reason why is because your foot lands on your heel first before you hit your toes. So since you're gonna run for a long period of time, it's nice to have a lot of cushions in the midsole area, so that way your foot doesn't get sore, and that way once you get to the end of the race, you have the energy to push yourself forward, basically like a short distance runner towards the end. Also, and like I say, they use the same thing as another thing they're looking for are spikes, which are very important too. Only difference is instead of emphasis more on the toe boxes, the shoe is going to be more flat, and the spikes are going to be more spread out, so that way it's a balance between of comfort, but also still having some of the ability to to push forward, just like a regular short distance track spikes. And then finally, now that I mentioned all the distance, all the type of shoes the track runners look for, I'm gonna finally talk some of the little experience I learned from track. Despite how simple track is, it's basically all you do is just run. I actually learned a lot of things from it. Every time I go to the gym, I always remember that moment. Like when I run, I always remember the times when I was in track and how it changed me. I learned such thing as like teammates like motivating me. And then one of the moments I've always remembered is how they always cheered for me to the end, and that always taught me like, oh, always push it to the end, no matter how you're feeling, at least reach to the end as fast as possible. And then I also learned, that at first I thought, oh, as long as I just thought of it as just exercise. You just run. That's all you do. But really, there's more to it. I learned the value of like how much value training has, and then it's nice. And then once you get to to the track meet, you finally show all your fruits of your labor. So that's why, and then like I say. And that's how I carry. Even though I'm not in track anymore, I always still have that mindset from what I've learned from my teammates. Is always push it to the very end, no matter what the situation is. So in conclusion, I started out in track with just basketball shoes, and I regretted it. But I understand the value of running shoes too. But not only that, I learned for short distance, lightweight and flex shoes and flexible shoes are key traits, and then while short distance is more on like more emphasis on cushion and heels. And then I finally talked about some experience and some values I learned from track and field, and then I'm like mainly pushing it to the very end, and hopefully what I've taught today had some insight, help you have some insights on how important some shoes can be, and also that way you don't end up like that fool that ran for like 1 mile with basketball shoes. And like I said, never give up. Get to the very bitter, fight for to the bitter end.